Hey, 420 MSP, Harry here with breaking news. Within the last week, there's a report out of a cannabis user sensitive data was exposed in a data breach. I quickly want to go over the news, then we're going to go around the horn with our analyst to frame it up and understand what it means. So a research security firm, VP and Mentor, broke the story about 5 days ago, January 22nd, that TH Suite, a point of sale system in the cannabis industry, had a data breach. They identified an unsecured Amazon S3 bucket owned by TH Suite that exposed sensitive data from multiple marijuana dispensaries around the US and their customers. So translation, 85,000 records, but the leaked data included scanned government and employee IDs, exposing personally identifiable information in our industry, that's PII, for over 30,000 individuals. So, Dwayne, let's start with you out in Cincinnati, Ohio. If you could kind of frame it up for us on what does this mean?
What this means is that something that I've been talking about for a while and trying to get people in the industry to take a look at is finally starting to come to fruition. A lot of people felt like since they weren't taking credit card data and things like that, they didn't have to worry about security or worry about robust equipment. And so what we have now is you have a point of sale company, software company, and I'm not sure what type of hardware they sell or anything like that because they don't show it on their website. But that has been breached with information that's just as or more valuable than credit card information. And so, what people in this industry are going to find out real fast is that if you don't secure this data, then there are going to be lawsuits and things like that that come your way. And so, you're only as good as your weakest link. And we've seen companies like Home Depot, Target, everyone, pretty much get hacked because of security vulnerabilities.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go to Mike Simmel out of New York. Mike, you're a compliance expert, best known for your work with HIPAA in the healthcare sector, but clearly you've developed some domain knowledge in the cannabis sector. So, Mike, give us to us straight. What's this mean from your point of view?
Well, as Dwayne said, this is something that we've been talking about and trying to warn people about. What is not clearly understood in the industry, actually in all industries, it's in healthcare, it's finance, as well as the cannabis business that we're talking about, is that all this data is really part of a shared risk model. And if you're an MSP that's supporting a dispensary, for example, a retailer selling the cannabis products, and they're doing medical marijuana, now you start dragging HIPAA into it. And what's confusing to people is that marijuana technically is illegal at the federal level. However, the federal government won't stop at enforcing something like HIPAA if you're not protecting people's information. They believe that it's the patient's civil rights to have their data protected. In fact, it's the Office for Civil Rights in the Department of Health and Human Services that enforces HIPAA. So this particular breach included information about medical marijuana. But the other thing that we see across the industry is that even if it's not medical marijuana, many of the dispensaries are copying driver's license info as the form of ID that they're using to validate that someone is of age and is able to buy the product. By doing that, they're keeping the driver's license information in their system, and I use their system kind of in quotes, which is often a cloud-based service, and that means that the information is protected by their state law, because all 50 states have laws that protect driver's license information, as well as social security numbers. In this particular breach, social security numbers were involved. So you're looking at both federal and state penalties. But when you're an MSP and you're supporting someone like this, even if it's not your breach, you could get dragged into it. And if you're providing managed services on a monthly basis and you're telling your client you're going to help them with all their IT needs, you need to hang on to your hat when something like this happens, because you may end up putting a lot of hours into somebody else's breach. My recommendation always is to say that you'll be responsible for any breach that you cause, but you're going to be able to charge your client to assist them in an investigation of a breach that either they caused or one of their vendors caused. So this also illustrates the requirements for HIPAA business associate relationships. If you're selling to a dispensary, then you need to have a business associate agreement with them. If they're using a cloud-based service for their point of sale, which many do, they have to have business associate agreements with those cloud services. And this incident is a great illustration. Obviously, we haven't seen any enforcement. It's news, just happened, but I can anticipate that this will end up resulting in lawsuits, state penalties, and federal penalties.
What's interesting to me, gentlemen, is that we say it just happened, but let me give you a timeline. So the date that this was discovered was Christmas Eve, December 24th, 2019. The date the owners were contacted over at TH Suite was December 26th, 2019. I'll give them that. You know, we had a major holiday right in the middle there. I'm going to give them that one, but it gets worse. The date Amazon AWS was contacted was January 7th, 2020. So talking a good 2 weeks basically there. Then add another week, the date that database closed was January 14th, 2020. Now, someone who's carried the bag as an IT consultant, MSP, now I'm an analyst, I find that unacceptable, that kind of time gap. Gentlemen, Dwayne, thoughts on that? That is shocking to me.
It is, but you have to realize that a lot of the individuals in this industry, you know, some of them have, you know, not operated or aren't used to the traditional scope of business, so to speak, that, you know, some of our traditional retail resellers would be. You know,
So they're not
I look at
type A hyperactive.
right. And so, you know, I mean, this is an industry that's been ripe for it because everybody's scrambling, trying to get, you know, the ability to use credit cards and things like that. And so, you know, we've looked into several of these companies that claim they can do credit card processing in the cannabis industry. And when you peel back the layers, it turns out to be an offshore bank or something shady going on, which we can't recommend to our resellers. And so, I mean, if you think about that, data that's flowing to other countries and things like that, this is really a call for why federal legislation, they need to decriminalize this so that, you know, people in this industry can get the same level of consulting that people in other industries have become accustomed to. And, you know, nobody is ever going to be 100% unhackable, because that's just not the case. But when you look at an industry that is by and large, you know, using consumer grade equipment, you know, very app based, you definitely need to have more security protocols. And, you know, as Mike was saying, you need to bring some stuff on prem, you know, especially when you're dealing with sensitive information like this. You know, and, you know, once they get decriminalized, then they need to look at EMV, chip and pin compliance, and things of that nature. So this is going to be a big education. And for hackers out there, this is a gold mine, because you have an industry with guys who are technologically savvy, may not understand and know all of the laws. And then you have software companies that'll say, we're hardware agnostic. It doesn't matter what you bring to us. And so, I mean, some sort of standards really needs to be set, because, you know, otherwise this is just a nightmare. Well, it depends on what perspective. It could be paradise if you're a hacker, but you know, it's a very bad situation that's just going to keep snowballing and compounding.
Yeah, and I've always felt this vertical, or call it a sector of the economy. I kind of prefer vertical, but it's sexy. it's got the hot hand. So of course it's a target for the it's got a lot of money, so it's a target for the bad guys. Hey, Mike, take us out. A point that Dwayne made about an educational process is you will both of you will be participating in our 2-day event in Denver, June 1st and 2nd. And Mike, you're heading up the compliance panel called Compliance is King. Why don't you take us out with some thoughts on what that panel will discuss in light of this and engage in the educational process?
Well, Harry, we're going to talk about HIPAA and state laws and things like that because they do apply, although to your point and to Dwayne's point, the people that are doing this really aren't paying attention to those things. But going back to the dates that you were talking about, the date that this was discovered and the owners contacted, it was right around Christmas. And one thing that I think hasn't been part of the discussion, and this is where we talk to business owners and get them to realize that they are completely responsible for compliance, not to become compliance experts, but to make sure that they protect their brands and their businesses from lawsuits and from business interruptions and from regulatory penalties. So I looked at the dates, and you said that it was discovered December 24th. The owners weren't contacted till the 26th. Well, it was Christmas Eve and Christmas. That makes sense. And then Amazon wasn't contacted until January 7th. My guess is that in the meantime, the owners of this organization, and keep in mind that there were really 3 different companies involved. There was the dispensary, there was their software vendor, and then Amazon. I think the first 2 organizations were talking to their insurance companies and their lawyers, trying to figure out what to do here before they contacted Amazon and before this became public. And that's a big part of the whole compliance and cybersecurity world now. Cyber liability insurance, as well as business interruption insurance. I talked to a client today that we did an assessment. We're doing a compliance project for. They had a breach. They went back to their insurance company. In the insurance company, they had different kinds of insurance, different parts to their policy. Under their cyber liability policy, they were reimbursed for actually paying the ransom after a ransomware attack, but then they were able to get over $100,000 from their business interruption insurance. It's a different type of policy. And of course, there were lawyers involved. There are lawyers involved right now because they're kind of negotiating with their insurance company using their attorneys to get their settlement. So these are business problems. And when we talk about compliance, when we talk about cybersecurity, compliance are just rules. Cybersecurity are things that you need to do to protect data, and those compliance regulations sometimes limit your options or tell you how to do it, but it's all business. And cybersecurity is a business problem with a technical solution. So we have to look at this and be able to leverage this particular incident with people in the cannabis industry to get them to understand that the state laws, federal laws, lawsuits, all these things, we're going to follow this, for years probably to see what happens. But it's a business discussion, not just compliance. If you're an MSP and you want to learn about compliance, come to the conference and you're going to realize that there are huge business opportunities for you to get out of what you learn there.
Dwayne, final thoughts.
Well, final thoughts from me. I agree with everything Mike has said. I'm really astounded that TH Sweets hasn't come out with anything. One, acknowledging it. I haven't seen anything, from them. And then 2, talking about, how they plan to shore up their system. Right now, if I'm a dispensary owner, a grower, anybody using that product, I'm very, scared because, you figure any amount of time since they even communicated it and they were using a unsecure Amazon S3 web server, we haven't heard, what the next thing is. And then I'm sure these dispensaries are still getting customers coming in who may not be aware. So we may see this number grow exponentially, and I would really tell, in the event someone, a dispensary owner or something, is looking at this, I would tell them to really do your due diligence before you sign up with a customer. And then, it's one thing to have your software secure, but you really have to have hardware and everything else that's tied into it secure also. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link, and clearly these guys have got some weak links. So, what I would encourage everybody to come to the show in Denver. We're going to talk about a variety of different things, but this is an industry where you can't stick your head in the sand because, a lot of people feel like since it's predominantly cash based, there's not a whole lot of risk. Well, now, we've got home addresses, driver's license numbers, in some states, fortunately I'm in a state that does not, put the social security number on a license anymore, but there may be some that do. And so now, your credit monitoring and things like that, just to make sure these guys don't come at you at a different angle.
Well, I'll take us out with my final analysis, and gentlemen, we'll reconvene near term to talk more about this and, of course, other security breaches that are forthcoming. But here's my take, is I distinctly remember, and I'm not making this up, back in 1999, March 26th, so March of 1999, Melissa came out, the virus, Melissa. And I was, thick into Windows Server and small business server. And gentlemen, at some level, we had never seen anything like Melissa globally. This is Melissa.
Yeah.
All right. Dwayne Roebuck of Blue Star, Mike Simmel, Compliance Authority. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for letting us hit it head on with this first of a kind, in my humble opinion, data breach inside the technology supply chain for cannabis at the point of sale level. Have a good evening, listeners. Thank you very much for following us.
Hey, thank you, guys.
Thanks, Harry.